Hello. Thanks for coming in the rain. We're missing one person on the panel, Marshall Curry. I hope he's showing up. So what is this panel about? I'm a producer in France, and I work a lot in the United States also. And the first thing you notice in the doc world in the United States is that they're all obsessed about the Academy Award for documentary. All filmmakers, directors always refer to it as, oh, my next film is going to be nominated for the Oscar, and broadcasters they say, oh, well, this film has Oscar potential, and producers tell you, yeah, this one will be the one that goes to the Oscar, and it's all about the Oscars. And so we want to find out a little bit what is behind this obsession and what's the point, and why filmmakers invest so much money in qualifying theatrical runs and other expenses, and if it's really worth doing this. And my first question was actually for Marshall, but he's not here. Well, he had a film that won in this year in Tribeca, and I wanted to ask him if he's obsessed to get this film qualified for the Oscars. But then it's an interesting story. He did a film, but we get back to this later with him. He did a film about a soldier, an American who went to Libya. Is it?
Libya.
Yeah.
It's Point and Shoot.
Point and Shoot. That is the title. I forgot the title. So, and when the filmmaker was asked how he chose Marshall, when the subject of the film was asked how he chose the filmmaker, he said, well, what did he say? Really, my notes are not really good here. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So he said Marshall had been nominated for 2 Academy Awards and he seemed available, so it seemed like a decent choice. And this is what happens more and more in the documentary world, that when you have a nomination as for the Academy Award, well, you play in another league, apparently. Is everyone familiar with the rules for the Oscar, or is that something that I should read before we start the panel? Yes. Okay. An eligible document is not long. Don't worry. An eligible documentary film is defined as a theatrically released non-fiction motion picture dealing creatively with cultural, artistic, historical, social, scientific, economic, or other subjects. It may be photographed in actual occurrence or may employ partial reenactment, stock footage, still animations, stop motion, or other techniques, as long as the emphasis is on fact and not on fiction. To be eligible for consideration, documentary feature must complete both a 7-day commercial run in a theater in Los Angeles County and a 7-day commercial run in a theater in the borough of Manhattan during the eligibility period. The period for documentary, the eligibility period begins on January 1st, 2014, and ends on December 31, 2014. All paperwork must be completed and received by the Academy no later than 30 days after the end of the qualifying runs. For films completing their qualifying runs after August, now that's too much of a detail now. Both commercial qualifying runs must take place in the same eligibility period and within 2 years of the motion picture's completion date. A run in only one of the qualifying cities disqualifies a picture from Academy Awards contention in the documentary feature category in any year. Screenings during each of the qualifying runs must occur at least twice daily and must begin between noon and 10 p.m. The motion picture must be exhibited for paid admission and must be advertised during each of its runs in at least one of these major newspapers in each city: the New York Times, Time Out New York, the Village Voice, Los Angeles Times, or LA Weekly. The film must have a movie critic review in the New York Times and or Los Angeles Times. A television critic review will not be accepted. Advertisement must have minimum dimensions of 1 inch by 2 inches and must include the theater, film title, and the dates and screening times of the qualifying exhibitions. Advertising must begin on the first day of the qualifying run, etc., etc. Last thing, films that in any version receive their first public exhibition or distribution in a non-theatrical format, including broadcast and cable vision, etc., etc., will not be eligible for Academy Award consideration. 10 minutes or 10% of the running time of a film, whichever is shorter, is allowed to be shown in a non-theatrical medium prior to the film's commercial qualifying runs. Here we go. These are the rules. And well, I want to start with, so the idea of this panel is to talk about the Oscars from the perspective of a distributor, Filipa Kowalski. She works for Cinefilm in Tel Aviv. And she had recently 2 films in the Oscar race, The Act of Killing in this year, in 2013, and The Gatekeepers in 2012. I don't know, you're probably familiar with these two films. The Act of Killing was this film about a very complex, dark, controversial, and political tale of the Indonesian genocide in the 60s. And The Gatekeepers tells the story of Shin Bet, the Israeli Internal Security Service, from the perspective of 6 of the former heads. So, Filipa, how, from your perspective, I mean, when you start, let's start with Gatekeepers. That was in 2012. When did you start thinking about this film could be in this race for the Oscars?
Hi, good morning. I don't think it was, well, maybe coming from Tel Aviv with The Gatekeepers, it wasn't on a wish list. We want to get to the Oscars. We started pitching it. We pitched it maybe 5 years before in Neon, and it did really well, and there was a lot of attention. And we carried on, and we were sharing the work with people from this side of the world. And it became pretty clear that in America, we're going to try and turn it into a feature film to go to the cinemas. Whereas here, it was going more towards television, because television had funded it predominantly in Germany and France, a great French partner. But we were showing it to Sony Picture Classics. I mean, I think for a year before the film was completed, I was in touch with them. So they were watching and debating and thinking if it was right for them and not too controversial. And they were the ones who got it into our system. And actually, in the case, I mean, every film has its own life, its own path, and its own way of getting there. And so many amazing films, in my opinion, don't go to the Oscars, and they're wonderful films that we've been involved with, and so many other films that we haven't been involved with. The list is huge, and often the films that are chosen, in 1 year you look at them and you say, really? I know so many other films that are not in there, and they were my favorite 5, and I'm sure everyone has those feelings. But The Gatekeepers and The Act of Killing, if you want to that particular story, they both started together in Telluride of 2012. The difference was that in Telluride of 2012, and maybe that's interesting strategically, by the time we got to Telluride in 2012, The Gatekeepers already had Sony Picture Classics on board. And The Act of Killing was still didn't have anything. It was their world premiere, and they didn't have any distribution. So because we had Sony Picture Classics, those people, as Simon well knows, have walked the path many times. And after 3 screenings in Telluride, we went to lunch with the boss of Sony Picture Classics, and he said, I think you're going to have a nomination. And he worked for that goal. So for him, that was very important to enhance visibility and get credibility, and they did it in a smart way, because they released the film in the cinema.
Should we just show the clip so that everyone knows what we're talking about?
Sure.
And then we go into details. So the clip of Gatekeepers, please.
לא רציתי עוד מחבלים חיים בבית משפט. אמרנו שאם אנחנו לא נתפוס אותם על חם, אנחנו בחיים לא נפצח את החבורה הזאת.
אני אוהב מבצעים כאלה. הם יפים, הם נקיים.
אם צריך, אפילו נהרוג את זה שקם להורגן.
לא מגיעים, לא מייצרים שלום בשיטות צבאיות.
גם בשבילם, דרך אגב, עבורם, גם אני הייתי טרוריסט.
כל שנה אנחנו סיכלנו יותר. כל שנה אנחנו השגנו יותר ביטחון. איך זה קרה? אנחנו רוצים ביטחון ומקבלים טרור?
פיגוע ההתאבדות הראשון בתוך תל אביב.
מאות ואלפים שצועדים.
והוא קם בוקר אחד ויורה בראש הממשלה.
מישהו לוחץ על כפתור, והפלאפון מתפוצץ.
במלחמה בטרור, שכח את המוסר. קודם תחפש את המוסר אצל הטרוריסט.
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
ניצחון זה בסך הכל לייצר מציאות מדינית טובה יותר. זה ניצחון.
So Philippa, what made Sony Classic think that this could be a film nominated for the Oscars? And Telluride, you have to say, is in August, no?
Yes,
just to get the timeline.
Yeah. Telluride is a film festival that's kind of under the radar. It's just before Toronto, and it counts and doesn't count, and it's a bit annoying, Toronto, that it doesn't count anymore as a festival. So maybe it will start counting as a festival, but for now it's kind of an off-the-record, kind of, I don't know, under-the-radar festival that is in the Rocky Mountains just a weekend before Toronto International Film Festival. And there are very few films that get accepted there. And those films, in advance, those that are accepted there are kind of marked as films that have Oscar possibilities. So they already get a lot of attention. But after 3 screenings there, and that was the first time this film was shown to the world, and you have a lot of press there, trades, you have a lot of very famous directors, well-known actors, producers, distributors, all from the United States. The vibe was so strong that they have a nose for these things, same as you have a nose for a good project, or you have a nose for a good cameraman or a good editor. They have a nose for this, and they, or a stomach, or whatever you need, intuition, they felt that this is a path they want to take. And so this was the end of August, and the end of February, we were already at the Oscars. So the path there was very clear. But of course, it's not always like that. This is when you have a parent that takes care of you. So once we had given it over to Sony Picture Classics, which is a big company, and especially compared to us, we were just there, we were their sous chefs. We were assisting where they need help. There's this big, incredibly well-oiled machine, and they know the path so well. And in fact, in that year, they had 2 films. They also had Simon's film as nominated, so they had 2 films. And they won once as well, Simon's film. So, so it was. They really know how to do it. The Act of Killing was different, because the Act of Killing, the whole path was a bit more grungier, more familiar to what a lot of us do all the time, because the film was in Telluride, and it did very well, but still no distributor. And then we went to TIFF, and we chose a PR person to work with us at TIFF to get visibility. We were putting the puzzle together. And after TIFF, Toronto, when the buzz was so strong, and then we had several companies fighting over the film, I think only a month or 2 later did we finalize, really lock in who the distributor was going to be. And then, of course, we couldn't comply with all Christoph's rules here for that year. So we had to go to the cinema a little later and only go to try and get it nominated for the following year. And that required actually the goodwill of a lot of broadcasters who had supported the film to give the film some air so that it could go to the Academy the following year. Because oddly enough, still, when a film gets a nomination, it brings press, it brings attention, and then hopefully brings ratings to broadcasters.
So how does it work with Sony Classics for them? They give you a minimum guarantee, and then what are they doing? I mean, to get you nominated?
Yes, well, they give financially, how does the system work? They give you a minimum guarantee against their successes in the cinemas and in all rights, actually, in North America. In the case of Sony Picture Classics, it's usually for a long time. Like, long is very long. Like, how long do you think is long, by the way? How many years? 15? 25? 25. 25 years you give your film away. Everyone should work out where they're going to be in 25 years. So anyways, they gave, that's what happens with Sony. You give a minimum guarantee, and then you negotiate for different rights, different and expenses, and there's a whole procedure of how that works when you're going to get your money back. With small companies or smaller ones, it's different, and you have more clout. Well, at least I have more clout against vis-a-vis a smaller company when Sony Picture Classics says it's a deal breaker, that's it, for certain things, and then you can't negotiate.
So I remember Dror, the filmmaker, like going on a 4-week tour through the United States.
That's true, yes.
Going to every town and just promoting the film, giving interviews. And
Yes, well, of course, the Sony Picture Classics or any distributor can't do it without filmmakers. So that's crucial. So I think in every case, every distributor we've ever worked with, the month before the film goes out, or as the film goes out in the United States, requires a full month of a filmmaker hopping all over the country, trying to promote and discuss the films. I mean, Dror did it super successfully for this film, but I don't know if any of you had seen a film Unfinished that we had several years ago. There was an incredible filmmaker, Yael Chersonsky. She almost vanished after that month. She's so thin as it is. By the end of that month, she came back like this to Israel. There was no time for her to eat. She was more interviews and more people and more, and she didn't know anyways in which city she is. So we had learned from her experience, and with Dror, we did set some limits for Sony. So not that I'm worried about Dror vanishing, but it's really, really tiring. Because in the end, you really don't know which state you are, which city, where you are, and people are asking similar questions, and you've got to be nice and polite and go into details and repeat yourself many, many times. But no distributor can do it without the goodwill and participation of filmmakers.
Simon, you were competing the same year. Do you have the same experiences, or?
Yeah, I guess I did have the same experience with Sony Classics.
Should we show the trailers before, or is that? Do you need trailers, or you want just discussion? Okay. Let's show the Sugarman trailer from Simon. We switch orders. I'm sorry, but we're missing someone, and then it's more dynamic, I guess.
It was almost as if he didn't even have to play. They were just happy to see him. So for a time, I think, they wanted to meet. It was reunion.
It was something completely different. It was for everybody there, I'm sure, the most exciting concert they'd ever been to, because it was unique. We'd never seen Rodriguez, and then all you heard was the bass player just playing do 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 And Rodriguez wandered out to the front of the stage, and the bass player actually just stopped playing. And it took a while. There was about 5 or 10 minutes of just people screaming at me.
Thanks for keeping me alive.
To go from being the outcast to being who he really was, because it was as though it was him again, and that was who he was, a musician on stage, playing for his fans.
So, who saw the film? I mean, everyone. It's fantastic. So I don't have to tell you.
Before I start, actually, I should
Yeah.
say it's very difficult for me to watch that clip. Given the recent news about poor Malik, who, as many of you know, has died very recently. So it's bittersweet for me to talk about that film in that context. And I guess I sort of want to kind of dedicate something, my contribution or whatever to Malik's memory. I sort of feel he's sort of in the room with us in many ways. Anyway, what was the question?
The question was, so, I mean, you have won an Oscar before with Man on Wire. We talk about it later. How did you get involved in this, and how? Okay.
Don't worry.
How did you get involved in the film, and when was the process starting, that this could be another film that can actually win an Oscar? And how did that...
I mean, the thing
is there a strategy that you develop as a producer to get there, or is that... How does it work?
I mean, I got involved in this film because Malik came to me sort of, it was about 2011, early 2011, and sort of cold called me and, had this film he'd been kind of toiling away at for years, and it's the greatest story he'd ever found, and could he come and see me? And I said yes, and he came, and I completely won me over. He was just a kind of wonderful, infectious enthusiast, but he really had this story that he thought could go all the way. In fact, I remember in our first meeting, he even uttered the word, Oscar, and I think my advice to him was just put that out of your mind. It did not seem to me to be, I have to be honest, a kind of film that was sort of predestined for Academy success. I loved it. Don't get me wrong.
I always thought it would win.
Well, Nick's much better at these things than I am.
No, I was sure it would win.
You felt the same about Man on Wire as well.
Totally sure. Plus, actually, as soon as I saw the rough cut of One Day in September, which we have a clip of, I mean, I'm odd man here because my career and my livelihood is not dependent on prizes, and the BBC is quite astonishingly averse, in a way, to taking any credit for Oscars. They're obsessed, the BBC, with domestic prizes, particularly BAFTAs, but Oscars they couldn't give a damn about, really. And I'm interested in Oscars in three ways. Firstly, I think they're brilliant it's brilliant that Simon's won 2, and they're very, very good for business. And they're good for getting money for new projects, because Draw has now got a fantastically huge sum of money for his next film, and I think documentary filmmakers should be richer. The second reason that I think are very important is, for me, they're a kind of peek into the sensibility, collective sensibility and mentality of the American elite, because the decision process that you didn't allude to is so complex and so foolish that it gives a shot at three groups of people, the people who work at the Academy first, then the bigwigs, who are all liberal, all middle-aged and all left-wing, who select the nominations. And then
the average age is 62.
150.
Yes, and there are only 150 of them.
And then
No,
it's
200.
entirely undemocratic and oligarchical. And the third group of people, who are this mystery collection of people inducted to membership of the Academy, who we think that the notion is, on the whole, they're much, much older, much richer, much more conservative, and mainly Jewish. But I don't really know about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
actually tick one of those boxes.
Well, no, you don't. You've got to be a lot older than you are, than both of you. So I think you get this fascinating kind of process whereby the American, taste is determined. That brings me to the third point. The Oscars are only accidentally concerned with real life or real journalism or real accounts of the world. I was certain. I didn't think it should have won the Oscar, but I didn't write anything about it. I was certain that the actor killing would not win an Oscar, for instance, because the people who sit and determine, we're not going to give it to the actor killing. At the same time, I felt that out of the three films that passed through Storyville that won Oscars, I was profoundly wrong about Taxi to the Dark Side. I never thought it was possible for such a rigorous onslaught on American interrogation practices, so detailed, so devastating, to win an Oscar. I thought they'd say, we don't want to give the Oscar to this. However, the other two films, I was certain.
I'm not sure, Nick, that
I should point out, because I think it's important to point out to
Exactly,
everyone
the
that
system
the
has
system
changed
has
this
changed,
year,
and basically it's changed in order to make it more democratic. I mean, the previous system was a system in which basically, in order to kind of get onto the shortlist, the kind of Academy created these little committees, of subcommittees, which would view a clutch of films, and as a result of that, so 3 or 4 people would kind of volunteer each year, and because they'd volunteer, they clearly inherently had nothing else to do.
Exactly, and maybe they were a little older because of that.
Can I just come in here for a second?
And so anomalies were created by that system.
But
So
still
great
two
films
tiers.
like Senna and many others were selected.
Can you just get in here for a second? Because
No,
I have to
the
structure.
difference
I have to structure this a little bit because it's getting all over the place. So that what you're saying about, I mean, there's one example that was in '94. It's like about around Hoop Dreams. So Hoop Dreams never got nominated and didn't get the Oscar that year. It was by far the best film and the most successful, the most film. And there's a little story that I want to read about that. So and then we move on to the new system, and then we get back to Sugarman. Is that okay? Good. So to the story about Hoop Dreams. Who knows about Hoop Dreams? Everyone, fantastic. You're all fantastic audience. So Hoop Dreams was in '94, and here's the full story of how this film didn't get nominated and didn't get the Oscar. At the time, the Academy did not have a documentary branch. Members of all the other branches were invited to join the committee that viewed all eligible films in the nomination process. But since 63 documentaries had qualified, today we have 151 in 2013. So it's getting up and up and up. So, where was I? But since 63 documentaries had qualified, the committee required members to attend screenings every Tuesday and Thursday night for 3 months. The result was a committee of Academy members with lots of free time, a group heavily skewed towards the aging and retired, so that what Nick was saying. They were a very eccentric group of individuals, admitted the Academy Executive Director Bruce Davis. Members were issued small flashlights when they entered the screening room. 15 minutes after each documentary began, they were given the option to stop the screening by switching on their lights. If 3/4 of the members did so, the movie was stopped. If not, a new vote was taken every 10 minutes and the power to end the screening shifted to a simple majority. A lot of very good movies were turned off because people didn't want to spend the time, said director and committee member Chuck Workman. These people were smart and they were dedicated, but their documentary experience was basically older or films on PBS. There were a whole world of non-fiction films going on, and they just kind of missed. Once a movie was screened and Hoop Dreams was indeed viewed all the way through, the committee members would discuss it, sometimes heatedly. I hear one member routinely broke into tears during these discussions. Then they filled out ballots, giving the film a numerical rating. When Hoop Dreams wasn't even nominated, then AMPA's president Arthur Hiller announced that he would take a close, hard look at the procedures of the documentary committee. Bruce Davis didn't say anything publicly, but the executive director took what was for him an unprecedented step. He quietly asked Price Waterhouse to send him the complete results of the voting. The accounting firm prepared a rundown that left out the names of the individual voters but showed how each voter had scored each film. Talking about the results a decade later, Davis said that the rundown was clear. A small group of members gave a 0 to every single movie except the 5 they wanted to see nominated. And they gave 10s to those 5, which completely skewed the voting. There was one film that received more scores of 10 than any other, but it wasn't nominated, he said, choosing his words carefully. It also got minimum scores from those, means 0, from those few voters, and that was enough to push it to the 6th place. In the aftermath of the Oscar show that year, the Academy eliminated the flashlight system and the pre-vote discussions. They split the committee in 2 so that the time commitment wouldn't be so substantial. And crucially, though at the time, the significance was lost on people who didn't know how Hoop Dreams lost its nomination, they altered the scoring system so that voters would rate each film on a scale of 6 to 10, so reducing the damage that a rock-bottom score could do. So that was in '94, and probably no one knows in the room which film was won that year. No?
Probably a film about the Holocaust.
Yes, in those
Not
days.
really.
Yes, no, in those days there was.
It's Maya Lin, A Strong, Clear Vision. And it's a film, I don't know that film, it's about the life of American artist Maya Lin, whose best-known work is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C.
It's a good film.
Okay.
It's a good
That
film.
was '94. So you want to tell about today? Because you're a member
Well,
of,
yeah,
the,
actually,
of this club.
Sugar Man was the first
yes.
year of the new rules, so it's kind of particularly interesting to know that I guess among the changes, I think the most significant change, in my view, is that, you know, in the previous system, at nomination stage, you had to basically go to see all 5 nominated films, all 5 of them, in a cinema at an Academy screening, and then sign an affidavit to say that you had seen all 5 films in the cinema, which immediately reduced the pool of voting Academy members. And any Academy member of the 6,000 members could do this, but you know, inevitably it reduced the pool to kind of a hardcore of you know, documentary branch members. The documentary branch has grown a bit. It's about 200 members now. Then, you know, a few years ago, it was probably 150. You know, the number of documentary branch
Who are these
members,
people? Mostly filmmakers or?
It's
Producers.
Yeah, it's producers, directors.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Commissioning editor.
So basically, I mean, I think, you know, most people's calculation is that kind of reduces the number of voters at nomination stage to about 50 or 60 people, you know, at best. But now in the new system, you know, the Academy actually sends DVD screeners out to all 6,000
people
who don't have to go to the cinema to see the films anymore, who get to vote on the films through an electronic you know, online system like everyone else, which sounds more democratic, but of course inevitably it's a system that favors popularity and resources. So when we talk about Sony Pictures Classics, which is a kind of distributor, I mean, those guys are kind of Oscar kind of machines, you know, they live You know, they see that, you know, Harvey Weinstein is their nemesis, you know, and so they are driven, like no other distributor that I've ever worked with before, to kind of Oscar glory, and, you know, understand the process in a way that I've never seen before. They, you know, they have, it's like kind of, you know, war to them.
You can imagine
and
a tank
they have the
in battle,
resources
then
to
they
be able
just
to
know how
support their ambitions. You know, so, you know, far from being a kind of, maybe the new system is in some ways more democratic, but it's far from a meritocracy. It rewards popularity, and Sugarman.
Sugarman
was, you know, by far and away the most sort of commercially successful film of that year, which kind of meant that, you know, Sony Classics was throwing good money after good, you know, and spent money, you know, they waged a campaign which was, you know, very much about flying Rodriguez and Malick, who you know, were both kind of great ambassadors for the film around the country, making sure that they were in all the right parties and all the right award ceremonies with, you know, to maximize, their thing was to maximize the number of Academy members who glad-handed with Malick and Rodriguez. So it was incredibly important, for example, for...
Can you tell us how much money we're talking about, what they spend on a campaign like this? I mean, is that...
I don't actually know specifically how much Sony Classics
give us a
spent
range,
on the Academy campaign, but I mean, you may have an idea. I mean,
it's hard to know how much...
$350,000 probably on the campaign itself.
I think at least. And I mean, they were... In that year, they had Sugarman and The Gatekeepers, and I'm assuming they wanted one of their films to win. And they were working hard on both. They understood they had one more popular film, but they had one that was getting a lot of good press, and they were working both sides. I mean, at that meeting at Telluride, or even before that, the meeting was, so all the awards, there's an award season, so you're going to be... your film's going to be admitted in for all the awards. And same thing with Dror, to go to all the right parties. Dror and Malick found themselves in a lot of joint events throughout that time. And it's true, Sony Picture guys, I thought it's only me coming from Israel with those idioms, but I really felt like a war machine. You know, they have, or I imagine a huge kind of like vessel where they just know everyone is so well oiled and everyone knows their role so well, and the PR companies, and they just know what they're doing. They're very well averse to do it, and they spend as much as they need, and obviously that money
Which is not the case with all the... I mean, Magnolia, who are a very good distributor and have resources, I mean, were incredibly sort of thrifty, actually, about their Academy campaign. They spent money on a publicist, you know, but there was none of the stuff that Sony Classics did.
Did they have two teams, like, working with each of you? I mean, or was it...
With Sony?
Or was it the same team?
Sometimes it was the same teams, and sometimes not. It depends on the PR companies or not. But let's say if you take maybe an interesting Draft House, which was a much smaller company that did The Act of Killing, they sat down, they worked out a strategy. They were also so much more, much thriftier with money. It was just like a different world. And the film was also nominated and got a lot of attention, but the expenses are less than a third in all. Sony Picture Classics.
My question, I appreciate what you're saying about Sony Picture Classics, but I actually think the outcome is just as much dependent on the taste of Academy
I
members.
agree. No, in many ways you're very right, yeah.
And it is an almost flawless expression of Academy members' taste, except occasionally when things slip in, which are rather surprising.
And the tastes have changed, I mean, so much.
Well, I don't think they have changed enormously. You may,
well,
it's still...
Previously, it was worthy, it was considered to be the worthier films that stood the greater chance of success at the Oscars, whereas now, you know, the last 3 years, I mean, you know...
The last 2 years is because of what, Simon, it's because of what you're saying, is that now 6,000 members have all the 5 DVDs sent to their homes.
Yeah.
It's the first year was the year of Sugarman, and last year, and you can see in both years, Sugarman and 20 Feet from Stardom are a type film when you sit and watch at home with your family, and your family always, you have a wonderful evening, and then you vote for it. So a huge producer who I greatly admire spoke to me at Sundance just before the Oscars when we were there, Simon, and he told me, I think Sugarman's going to win. And I said, thank you. And I said, why is that? So he said, well, because we watch Sugar Man at home. My daughter never watches documentaries. I've been trying to persuade her for years. She's 15 to watch. And I asked her, try this one. She watched it with her girlfriend, and we all sat down and watched it together. And we had such a wonderful evening. I knew that other families are doing the same.
Is it a good thing that because of the new rules, maybe filmmakers are kind of being nudged towards films
The lighter ones,
that require a certain amount of commercial success in order to have a shot Academy success? And I don't say, I'm not, there's no
do you think that
opinion in my...
Do you think that Man on Wire now would not have won the Oscar?
Well, Man on Wire is an interesting case in point because it won under the old rules.
Yes.
Despite the fact that it's not a film about an issue.
Yeah.
And it indeed was, you know, by quite a long way,
Does anyone know
film of
Man
that
on
year that
Wire?
was
Yes, you want to see the
success.
clip or not? Yes? No? Okay.
Yes, see a clip.
Clip,
Yeah.
please. Man
Clips
on
are
Wire.
fun.
Simon Chin. Sorry, I have to.
I start working as a wire worker who is studying his cable. And instead of doing an entire study of the cable for the whole lens, seeing the first cavity and keep walking, seeing the middle, which is so soft and treacherous, seeing the second cavity, how it is, no, I do only go to the first cavity and I know enough. Now I'm going to perform.
I saw his face changing. He was very tense, and all of a sudden there was something like a relief in him. And from that time I thought, that's it. He's secure, it's good. And wow, that's...
J'ai vu Philippe. J'ai vu Philippe là-haut et c'était extraordinaire. C'était tellement, tellement beau. C'était comme s'il marchait sur un nuage. Et il y a eu des moments extraordinaires. Il s'est couché. Et ça, c'était l'extase de voir cette image de Philippe couché là-haut. Et puis l'autre moment très très fort, c'est quand l'émotion est très... C'était tellement beau. Et quand il s'est agenouillé, il y a un moment où il s'est agenouillé et il a salué. Et donc je criais, regardez, regardez, et les gens ont commencé à se rassembler, mais personne ne voyait. Et ils me disent, mais qu'est-ce que vous voyez? Et je leur disais, mais un funambule, regardez, un funambule, il marche, il marche.
I sit down on the wire in one of my crossing, and I did something that amazed people, actually look all the way down, to look at something that I will never in my life see again. So I can tell you, and yes, probably it's a lie, but to me it's not. I heard the crowd, I saw the crowd, I hear them murmur.
Beyond anything you could ever imagine. It was just mind-boggling. The awe of the event and the overwhelming largeness of the scale of the situation took my mind into a place where I really wasn't that concerned about him. It was magical. It was just profound.
It's a very beautiful film, and it reconciled me with the use of Eric Satie in documentary films. What
I
was
actually,
the-
I guess the point about that was that just thinking, it had a couple of things that made it sort of good Oscar fodder. One which was The Twin Towers. You know, it was a film that sort of profoundly connected with an American audience. You know, that year, probably if it come out a couple of years earlier, it may not have. It might have been considered somehow tasteless. I don't know, but I always felt the timing was pretty fortunate for us. And the second thing is in a weird way, actually, it was not a divisive film. You know, it was a film that everyone sort of kind of got behind. There was no, unlike The Act of Killing, which was a kind of deeply divisive film. You know,
Deeply divisive.
You know, it's, you know, there was a real consensus about it going into the Academy Awards that was sort of weird. And the same I have to say was true of Sugar Man. They were kind of easy films to vote for.
I think there are always exceptions, and I think Man on Wire was an exception because it ticked on several boxes, and that's why it won in the years before it would go out wide, because it was an exceptional film, and yet it was also it was profound. It wasn't light. It wasn't too light. It just ticked on. It worked well, I think, from that point of view. But I think it would have done well also with 6,000 viewers watching it. Man on Wire.
It would have won. Yes.
Can we talk about the process again, Simon? I mean, okay, Man on Wire. When did you? I mean, it's a British film, and Nick was involved in the film very, very early on. And so, how was the process to get to this Oscar thing? I mean, so you said Magnolia came on board, but at which point?
I mean, I personally, I'm not kind of. Obviously, one hopes, you know, one dreams, you know. Yeah. But I can't really go into anything thinking, oh, you know, what is the process by which, you know, if I do this and that and the other, I'm gonna get nominated for an Oscar. No, I just think
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about. I mean, people they get involved together with you. You know, I mean.
Sorry.
Well, I talk about the people that get involved together with you to bring you to the Oscars. I mean, I think.
Oh yeah, no,
you mean the partners?
It becomes a
the
process
partners,
once
yes.
the distribution kind of community get involved.
Yeah.
It becomes a much more a process that is driven, I think, by other considerations. You know, money and commercial outcomes. But in terms of the kind of filmmaking, yes, I mean, you always want to do your best work and hope that it gets rewarded. But yeah, that's not something that James or I ever kind of talked about, ever actually during the process. We might have privately, fantasized, but yeah.
No, I was always sure it was going to win the Oscar. When you walked in my office, and when it was decided that James should do the film, and here's Philippe Petit, and this is the story, I thought, that's great, it's going to win an Oscar. I didn't think the film would be as beautiful as it was, because it is so beautiful, and I'm sure it didn't win the Oscar because it was so beautiful, but that was a bonus for me, because I think it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and I love it passionately, and I watched it many times. But I just can't talk about the process at all, except to say that how many of you know what the Peabody Awards are? Well, we should have our Peabody Awards, because the committee of the Peabody Awards is arranged by the University of Georgia, and I don't know who's on the committee, but when I've met anyone on the committee, they've always struck me as being very intelligent people. And the great thing about the Peabody Awards is there are no categories. It's sort of anything that goes on the media. It's not tilted towards cinema. In fact, it's rather not cinema, but it's broadcast online, the lot. And the Peabody Awards have a record every year, in my view, of giving consistently awards to the best, most provocative documentaries. And they're often documentaries that fail totally as a consequence of the incompetence of broadcasters or distributors. But the record is staggering, and if you were to sit down and watch year by year, and the great thing is there are no categories. You supply your film, and you say why your film is important, or your series, and they accept or don't accept your reason for saying your film is great. And I think we should have Peabodys in Britain. I think the Oscars are wonderful, but they're an offshoot of show business, And as Simon says, the imperative distribution. But it is amazing, actually, how many astonishing films do win the Oscars. And I think the nominations are just as important. I mean, I was so pleased that Jaw got a nomination.
I mean, the Oscars.
for the Gatekeeper.
I think, yeah, exactly. I
actually
think the
felt-
nominations,
I felt The
yeah.
Gatekeeper's a better film than Sugar Man, if I'm absolutely honest. I'm not just
Simon was sitting next to us at the Oscar
But-
and he
but-
kept telling me, you're going to win, you're going to win.
But it was but those in the end, bar it's so long ago. One Day in September, those sort of films don't win. I mean, you can see a clip out of One Day in September. You got it?
Yes.
No.
Can I ask one more question before we get into this?
Can I just say something about this first, or would you like to? No, I just want to say about the process. Just
Okay,
to
the
tell you,
process. Yeah.
because
Yeah, we started with that.
I think, yes, because I think that it is very important. I mean, if you want to go to everyone wants an Oscar and everyone wants to be nominated, so let's take that as a given. But I see filmmakers and producers who don't have distributors still wanting to go to the Oscars and then doing the qualification and everything on their own. I think that's really tough, and I think it's very costly, and I wouldn't recommend it. There are other, because there are, I mean, it's hard to say it because everyone's got the right to promote their films their whatever way they want to, but if you're doing it on your own, it means you've shopped around and all the distributors have said no. And if they've none of them feel that they can take it a step further, go theatrical or go to the Oscars, your chances are so slim, and it's expensive. You get people who offer you deals today. Let's say the Quad offers you, pay me $11,000, I'll do you, I'll put your film out and give you a qualifying run. I think that's kind of a waste of money. Sorry. So just you.
But what it boils down to is actually, I was going to say, as an Academy member, you get 150 films. At a certain point in the year, where you get sent a box of 90 films, and it is paralyzing. There's no way that you could ever begin to sort of break the back of that volume of films. If you've got a life.
So, but what are you doing then? I mean,
so you watch
the ones with
I'm
visibility.
afraid you watch exactly the films that you've heard about. That's it. Simple as that.
So is there a system somewhere that
there is a system
that
whereby
people tell
basically
you what are the films you should watch?
Yeah,
or?
well, there's a place, a chat room you can go to on the Academy website for documentary branch members, where other members recommend films to other members. But even consulting that is something that I imagine a very small minority of documentary branch members actually do.
I registered your question. I just have one because I want to. There's an interesting. I mean, Christine Camdessus is here. She went to the same year then Gatekeepers and Sugarman. She had 5 broken cameras at the nomination. And Christine told me. I mean, do you want to tell the story about how your film got nominated?
No,
just
no, I
because
think
it was a little bit the outsider and the small film coming from Israel, Palestine, and
yeah,
just
it
how
was
did
a
it get
small
there?
film, but I don't know. It's funny. I listen to you, and it's funny to put yourself back in the time and thinking that you were having this conversation with big promotion in place. And no, 5 Broken Camera was obviously smaller film. But it's true that the 2 directors were very convinced very early that they would go for the Oscar race, which we couldn't believe. We didn't believe that at all. I think the experience is pretty different because we went through the festival process, and the word of mouth on the film come and growed, and from one festival to another, we got the impression that those 2 directors were right. I mean, there was an option to the point that we stopped the broadcasting. We asked the broadcasters not to broadcast the film, to give the film a chance. But being honest, I never thought it would happen. And it's true that even Oscar nomination is important. I used to say as a joke that
you told me yesterday that you had like a very influential person backing your film. That was Michael Moore, and Michael Moore
that's true. If you don't have a studio, you better have Michael Moore.
So can you tell us a bit more how that
We had
worked?
a distributor in the US, a known indie distributor called Kinolober, and he encouraged us to present the film to Traverse City Festival, which was a festival I never heard of, which happened to be the Michael Moore Festival. And Michael Moore decided that Matt Bernard, who is a Palestinian director and principal character of the film, was his new best friend, and that he was going to make him go up to Hollywood. And it is true that this is another way. It doesn't stop you to pay a bit of PR and organize the screenings, but obviously it helps a lot. So yeah, I would say for the one like me, small company, indie, never thought it would happen to go to Hollywood, be friend with Michael Moore. Or make him being friend with you. I mean, I didn't do anything for that, I promise. He's very supportive. He's very supportive of the, and I think every year or once in a while, he pick up someone that he will help for political activist reason.
So let me get back to Simon. Is it when you get these boxes? So can other Academy members, they can just they tell you like you should watch this, you should watch that, or is there an internal thing going on like a
there's, I mean, as I described, there's this
that's what
website. That's it. But I
You're
guess
not allowed to be solicited.
Is that influential or not? I mean, does it? No.
I don't really know what is influential. I mean, I guess it's going to the right parties. I mean, it's a bit of it's weird alchemy.
Why is it every year is some outsider in the nomination list?
Not to say that it's not great to be a recipient, to be on the receiving end of all these kind of people who are desperately trying to figure out what's going to, work. It's good, but I have to say, I don't know, but I sort of struggle with it all. The process of kind of campaigning, Anyway, yeah.
No, because the
Sugar
process
Man
is
was
there
very
and not
strong.
there.
I mean, if I recollect arriving in LA this year, I was poster for Sugar Man. Well, I have the same impression. When I saw the film, I called my friends and I said, we're done. You can say whatever, Sugar Man will win, because the feel-good movie, that was clear to me weeks before. But the campaign in the city for Sugar Man, I mean, you felt, and Gatekeepers you could see, but Sugar Man was all over the place.
Yeah, of course, it's not about merit. Of course it's not. Your film was a wonderful film and probably should have won, and so should yours.
No.
I mean,
and
it's ridiculous.
And it's also not only about...
I understand why Simon is so popular.
But there's a complexity. Look at this year with the Jihan's film. And she had Netflix behind her, and all Los Angeles was one big billboard for the square. It was huge. And when I met the guys of Netflix, I said, oh, guys, you're spending millions in promoting the film. And I was being a bit supercilious or facetious about this. And he said, yes, when we support a film, we support it all the way.
Yeah, but that's
so I said, millions, I said. He said, I hear you.
Yeah. But that's the Netflix, when they support the square. Who saw the square? Yeah, quite a lot. We managed to get the square out of Netflix on it, so we showed on the BBC in a short window. But look, they're selling, they don't think the square is going to win the Oscar. They're actually selling themselves as people behind an important film that's been nominated for an Oscar. And I think that's just as important. I think I don't agree with you.
Paradigm
but
is about marketing. I mean,
it's marketing, yes.
But if I'm looking at it from a completely different point of view, I would say that, in fact, that from where I sit, the Oscars have been good, actually, in promoting American awareness. It's very hard to get Americans to attend to anything with a range of choices in popular culture, and both on the question of torture, Alex Guinness' film, and the most important question outside the shores of America, American foreign policy, Israel and the Palestinians. the record in the past year has been very good indeed. I mean, really, Americans know more about the traumatic relationship of Israelis and Palestinians thanks to the gatekeepers, thanks to 5 broken cameras. If it hadn't been for the Oscars, these films would have sort of disappeared.
It's true. It's true. I mean,
so
yes.
it's a good thing. You
So
know.
I mean, in the end of the day, it's very true that the reason that all the Los Angeles was one big billboard about Netflix and the Square was for Netflix to promote themselves as someone that has a nomination. But in the end of the day, everyone got speaking about the Square, which was very good. So it was the debate. And even the act of killing that not everyone in this room likes did bring about a debate about a film, which people had. Americans wouldn't debate about a film like this normally in so many places.
Yeah.
And there was a debate about a film. Do you like it or you don't? There was a debate about how to portray Indonesia. Indonesia's always been under the radar, like way under the radar. Suddenly people had to open a map maybe and look, where is Indonesia, for crying out loud? What happened in the 60s in Indonesia? So there are good outcomes from all these things, I think, I hope.
But I think it's also difficult.
Questions.
I mean, Dimitri, who I worked with on The Imposter, Dimitri produced The Imposter, and I was executive producer. Bart Layton directed it. It was a film that was in the same year as Sugar Man and The Gatekeepers.
Was that nominated?
It's a brilliant piece of
was
work,
not.
I actually felt it was a travesty that film should get.
Well, I can tell you why it wasn't nominated. I'll tell you, because it wasn't a feel-good film, and it had a kind of hybrid fact-fiction element that one could find a lot to admire in, but is unlikely to please all the people on this obstacle
It was
course
also
to
a
fame.
film that we had a shitty distributor.
Well, that's
who I can say that public now because they're no longer in business and they don't deserve to be. And
Who
they
are
didn't
they?
know what to do. They're called Indomina.
Dominant.
You have to speak in a microphone because
I
this
have
is
the
all
microphone.
recorded.
Can I ask my question? I've had my hand up for 15 minutes.
You have, yes.
I just was curious about some broadcasters not wanting to be nominated because they're in the world of television and cable, and even if they want the award if you win, they don't want to delay the broadcast. So, there's even PBS does not always.
I can answer that as a broadcaster.
Thank you.
The holdbacks are the biggest pain in the ass for broadcasters in the world, because what happens if you have a film in cinemas, and bear in mind that most films fail totally in cinemas, is that your publicity, you spent money on the film, the publicity effort of the film occurs when the film fails in the cinema. So by the time you show the film, you get nothing out of the fact it's been in the cinema. So I think you're right that broadcasters have an idea of the Oscar. It's great if it comes, but as long as we don't have too much pain as a consequence. But
there's a flip side to that.
I
think as
love
which is
that.
the story world, I guess, has also benefited.
Yeah,
from
hugely.
Yes.
The kind of the way in which theatrical distribution and the Oscars has created a consciousness for films that wouldn't otherwise have had.
I would say that's true about myself at Storyville, but the brass at the BBC couldn't give a damn. They're not interested. They're interested in piling up BAFTAs.
They
should be. Of course they should
Not
be.
in every case.
Of course it should be.
That's
They
the
work,
problem, not
they-
in every
you know,
case.
They work in big organizations closed off from the rest of culture, where what they do with their own resources is more important than them. But I would say that most all broadcasters would love to have an Oscar, for God's sake. And they'd like to go there, but they're never invited. They're not important enough. They're not glamorous enough.
Yes, no, it is this complexity, let's say, with the gatekeepers. Arte didn't want, we had to push forward. And finally, it was really difficult to get them to push a bit more, because once the film is qualified, they could show the film. And we said, well, why don't you wait for the Oscars themselves? It's just a shame. You'll get so much more attention. And it was a whole huge debate, had to go right up to the top for major discussions. And finally they did. And Le Monde went wild over the weekend of the Oscars. And they broke all records of ratings. And then we were, wow, that was very cool. Because we got close on 1 million people seeing it only in France, the first broadcast. So that was, then everyone was delighted. Now the Oscars are in a good place for Arte. But, it doesn't always work like that. It's true.
So, Nick, was it easy for you to push back Men on Wire? I mean, you got involved so early in the film, and then...
It was a bit of a battle. No, I think it was quite a battle, as I recall, getting it commissioned. I mean, I might have said to everyone, if you invest in this film, it will win the Oscar. But I seem to remember quite a lot of problems getting it commissioned. I love the film, particularly, and I see the clip, actually, because it's the only time, probably in the history of the Oscars, that people's, apart from the 50s and 60s, that people's subtitle-speaking wacky French have actually got a big prize. You know, I mean, and I think that Philippe's accent is it's a monument as important as the Twin Towers. No one can possibly destroy the English language in the way that Philippe Petit did.
He speaks better English than you do. Come on.
I don't think so.
I think this film was never released in France, no, theatrically?
Well, we
Simon?
made a... Well,
No, you're right.
don't.
The French...
No, they didn't want him speaking.
Felt that it was... they actually, a very
you
good
tell me about
theatrical
that.
distributor acquired it very well, paid a lot of money for it, and then decided that they should just send it straight to video because of
the
actually,
language?
I think in hindsight, I think I now understand it's that to see a kind of Frenchman, particularly a very arrogant Frenchman, speaking, you say, butchering the English language and being subtitled.
No, it's
just
lovely.
not something
It reminds me of my mother's
go
French.
down well.
But no, that's true in France. You told me that. If you re-recorded the interview in French, it would have gone straight in the cinemas. Well, I don't know. I think if actually in Britain you shot a feature-length film with Eddie Izzard where he spoke French the whole time, you might have problems subtitling Eddie Izzard out of French back into English in cinemas. So it's not just French people.
I think it's everywhere. Yeah,
it's
I agree.
everywhere.
Everywhere.
So let's be honest about that.
Getting, one more question for Simon, for Men on Wire, and then we go back to you, okay? So Men on Wire made like 5.2 million in the box office worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah, I read that, so I don't know.
I think it did actually a bit more than that. But
anyway. A bit more, fine, good, even better. But what is the impact of the Oscar in that? How much in percentage? Can you say that, or is that
difficult to quantify? And I'm not sure anyone's done the sort of mathematical exercise of trying to sort of join the dots. But I guess, just my impression and what people tell me is that it kind of creates longevity for a film. If documentaries are so hard, certainly theatrical ones or ones with theatrical ambitions, the figure you mentioned is a great figure for a documentary, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not particularly amazing, is it? Certainly compared to the bigger movies out there. But I guess if you can become one of those films, one of those docs that enters some other place, that becomes one of those films that you kind of should have seen, sort of thing, which I think that Oscar certainly helps to create, then you're maybe kind of given a shot at a really long life and revenue, I guess, for that
so it's
long life.
Actually, is it what I want to find out is actually worth going after the Oscar? Yes, of course.
From my point of view, the main reason it's worth it. Look, it is really lovely to win an Oscar. I don't want to sort of be cynical about that at all. And
it's good for your career too, I guess.
It's an amazing thing to have done. But yeah, listen, the most pleasing thing for me, I have to be honest, after Man on Wire, and Nick was alluding to this before, was not going to the Vanity Fair party. It was actually the fact that suddenly, that the next film was Project Nim, actually. Yeah. My God, the wheels was just oiled in a way that was just unbelievable to me. It was like, wow, the money just kind of came, immediately, swiftly, at a very, very good level. Frankly, the deals I was able to do, were of a completely different nature. It's good for business,
So it opens doors for the next film.
For a while, the glow fades.
Ask Christine about that. Was it good for business?
Microphone, this is all recorded, so you have to speak in the microphone.
Well, yes, it's good for business. It's good for business in the U.S. because if you're coming from France or Palestine, you're nobody in the U.S. If you're Oscar nominee, you become, you exist. You're now on the map. I've not seen, but if it happens, I'll tell you. I've not seen a change complete change in the way, in the business proposal I've received. No, I didn't see that. I think for the film it's being very important, for Emal's story it's being very important, and for my little company, yeah, maybe, because you'll give me the microphone. So yeah, you suddenly could give the microphone to any of the people here. We've done the same job for the last 20 years. So yeah, so suddenly you get the microphone in a quicker way.
So well, I wanted to ask all these questions to Marshall because he was the only filmmaker on the panel, and I don't know where the hell he is, but it's good for filmmakers too, no? I mean, when you say, you said about Drawer, what I mean, he's doing another film.
Yes, no, for Drawer,
Gatekeepers.
Again, not every filmmaker takes it to the same places. I see Guy Davidi. Yeah. Guy Davidi, the Five Broken Cameras, one of the two directors, versus Drawer Moret. Drawer Moret really knew how to capitalize. He really maximized, and he's now making a documentary and a feature film. He's always wanted to make a feature film. His main job all his life was a DOP in fiction films, and he wanted to direct, and now he's getting the opportunity to direct with incredible backing. And so he's managing to maximize, and he's also at an age where it's working well for him. Some people I know who've been nominated, let's say, for foreign films, were nominated when they were much younger, and it paralyzed them.
Yeah.
They've got incredible offers, and it really almost castorized them, and for 10 years they could hardly do anything. They were nominated, everyone was at them offering $20 million, I offer you this, you're the flavor of the week, month, day, don't know, whatever, in Los Angeles, and everyone's at you, all the agents, and if you're a tough cookie and you can handle it, it's great, and you can enjoy it. It may be a matter of age, a matter of personality. Some people thrive in it, and some people just
I think it's
die
really
in it.
double-edged.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the common perception, misperception that the Oscars is just a kind of path to further success and glory, really needs to be kind of considered very carefully. I think the Oscars can produce kind of crushing pressure on young filmmakers, and old filmmakers, there are certainly plenty of directors who've won Oscars that I've talked to, who haven't gone on to even work for quite a long time.
Yes, exactly. I mean, see Hani Abu
You
Assad.
get a lot of smoke blown up your ass by Hollywood studios, all of which is completely illusory. Anyway.
Yeah, not everyone can handle it or wants to handle it or is able to. You're nominated and then you're offered $20 million to do this, $30 million here, come to me, I'll give you this, I'll do you that. And now you've got some agent you've never even heard or understood the concept of an agent. Someone has signed a deal for you, you've got a deadline, move, write. But it doesn't mean you can suddenly write. And here, you're in a great apartment in Los Angeles, you don't have any friends in Los Angeles, you've got all this money and you think this is your moment, and you look at the paper and that's it. You spend 6 months looking at the paper, their deal is off, finito. And then you just don't know what to do for so many years till you're back in your real realm. And some people, like Drawer, for instance, is a good example of someone who's enjoying it. So for him, it's working well. So it really depends.
It worked well for other filmmakers too, like
sure.
Alex Gibney.
Gibney
he
enjoyed
started
it
his
as well.
career really after that.
Yes,
doing more and more documentaries for theatrical release, and then it works for Joshua Oppenheimer.
Joshua Oppenheimer, it works in a different way because he's more academically inclined and he works in different ways. But yes, it worked very well for him as well. He could contain it, but he's kept his distance from Hollywood. He's containing it by making another film in Indonesia in his way, in the way he wants to do things. But he's also managing to enjoy the success he's had, to take it to another level.
And it worked for James March too. I mean,
yes, James.
Yeah, I mean, it did work for James actually, but it works for James for different reasons. I mean, he's just got a very strong work ethic. Actually, he had a TV drama, Red Riding, that he went on to. He wants to work. And he's not. There was a period where after the Academy Awards, he was getting calls from all sorts of studios. He had a very kind of healthy attitude to all that. He never really believed it. you know. So he's kind of done his own thing.
You should say about James that prior to Malinois, he lived in penury
Yes, no question.
for 5 years
It
in
has
New
done
York.
him-
And we got him a tiny bit of money to do a film that he had learned to shoot and edit, which is about the five-a-side homeless football team in Manhattan. Nobody wanted this film. And so I think in the case of James that he's seasoned. He's had so many ups and downs. He's such an extraordinary person and a great filmmaker. By the way, he did get one perk, which was appearing in ads for Burberry clothes. Because I was in Taipei Airport and I thought, oh, I know this person. But it's not Kenneth Branagh, it's James Marsh, the Oscar winner.
Other questions? Oh, you wanted to, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just think it's absolutely fascinating that Insight the panel is able to give into the process of how these things happen, you know, the reality of how things happen, and all your cautionary words about how you need that finance weight experience behind you. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was if you could talk a bit about the PR people who run those campaigns, which do feel like American electoral campaigns. You know, you need money and charisma and kind of popularity as much as you need quality, is how it feels sometimes to the outsider. But I was fascinated by those, there are a handful of people who seem incredibly instrumental. I don't know, maybe Simon, you could
I agree about PR. It's a huge lesson for me, how important it is to choose the right PR person for a film. It sometimes can even be, I don't want to say make or break, because a good film is going to be a good film, but the positioning of a film right in the beginning is dramatic. Because I saw the PR people around the gatekeepers. So those are people that Sony Picture Classics has worked for a million years. And every meeting, the PR people, like 5 people would come, 6 people. And you'd say, really? There are more people doing the PR than made the film. It's incredible. And okay, of course, afterwards you've also got to pay all these people's salaries, and you see the bills. It's, you know, not great. But for the act of killing, we chose a PR person, so of course an independent. She did an incredible job. She had 1 person working with her. So simultaneously, I saw the 2 working, and the act of killing she did an incredible job positioning it to Telluride in Toronto. The press and industry screening at Toronto, which is normally, I don't know, 20 people attend, 30 people attend a documentary, 50 people attend. If you get 50 people in your press and industry screening in Toronto, you're over the top, delighted, over the moon. And in this press and industry screening in Toronto, the first press and industry for The Act of Killing, thanks to our PR person and, okay, the good words from Errol Morris and Werner Herzog, 340 people came. No one had ever seen a press and industry like that. And this is before anyone had seen the film. So she was doing something very good. And I know that especially in North America, but also for all big festivals, PR is crucial. I mean, and I've got a lot of tips if anyone wants to hear how to choose PRs.
I have to say on that, I mean, you know, when you work with Sony Classics, it's a bit different. It's like all roads lead to Tom Bernard and Michael Barker. You know, they are totally hands-on. You know, driving the process. You know, figuring out how to create the circumstances to get that, you know, Oscar nomination, which is very much also about, you know, releasing the film successfully. And the Sugar Man did not open well. You know, it was not a foregone conclusion. It had the kind of opening which you kind of look at the opening number, the opening weekend number, and you kind of think, we're dead. And you know, I was on the phone to them the next day, and they were like, don't worry, slow and steady wins the race. We're going to get that. Which, you know, the PR people sort of service Tom and Michael.
Yes, it's true. They service them.
Sony Classics. And they're very, very good, and they're very loyal. They've worked with them for a long, long time. With other distributors, they kind of assume a much greater significance. There's this woman called Fridel Pagodin, right, who works for Magnolia, and she's a kind of documentary Oscars sort of specialist, and you know, she's got her list of all the Academy members.
Yes, they've got these black books,
so,
right?
Yeah.
Well, we had also for The Act of Killing, Susan Nogert did the first section for the TIFF and New York, and then for the Oscar campaign, then there's, you know, as you say, there are PR people who do Oscar campaigns. And we worked with a woman called Laura Kim, who was amazing. She just so committed and she's the one who got all the visibility in Los Angeles. She now works for Participant Media, so she's off.
But okay, one more question, okay? I don't know, how much time do we have? Okay.
Yeah. Hi. You talked about the old and new systems of voting, both having their own kind of flaws. What would make it better? I mean, is there anything that you would like to see introduced that could help it?
I mean, I think that the kind of conclusion from the last couple of years, the kind of consensus among the kind of the Academy and the documentary branch is that they've sort of arrived at the least worst system in a way. And I think there is a kind of recognition that it's deeply flawed. But what is the alternative? And I don't think anyone's come up with them.
Don't you think that the obligation to be reviewed in the LA Times or the New York Times is ridiculous? I mean, that you can't sustain that possibly.
It is ridiculous, but I think it's more a kind of benchmark of what is actually
a
theatrical film.
No, it's
because they only review films that are released theatrically.
Chic American liberal elite.
Well, if they don't have it, there would be more films.
The idea behind that is that the LA and New York Times actually have an obligation, supposedly, to review every theatrical film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's trying to I mean, the weird thing is that lots of films that really aren't theatrical sort of seem to still slip under the radar.
I bet you we could come
Nick,
up with a list of very good documentaries that got theatrical releases that weren't touched by the LA Times or the New York Times.
Nick, this is actually good for you. I mean, that there is this rule, because there would be so many more filmmakers. They would tell you, well, just my film, we want to run for the Oscar, and just can you broadcast it next year?
No,
this rule is actually helping you.
No, I don't mind at all about that. I really, really think people should do what they want with their films. So I really think places like Storyville should do the utmost to ensure that people get exposure, because the films are great and they have to make their money. And I'm prepared to put up any amount of shit, really, and that is true, in order to allow people to get theatrical distribution if they think it's important and if they win prizes. I think
to be realistic about.
I think you have to be realistic.
What that process is and the value of it, for films that really aren't going to ever work theatrically, and therefore there's nothing more depressing than going to the cinema to see your film and there's no one there.
Two people.
But I think the answer to your question is that you can never create a perfect system for any system of jury selection or awards. They're all flawed. But the interesting thing is that they should be flawed in different ways. So I think the dominance of the Oscars is on the whole a very bad thing in America, and it would be better if, as I said, places like Peabody, places like Tribeca, places like Sundance has ascended enormously. To get an award at Sundance means much more than it did 5 years ago. And all of that is good, but there should be even more prizes. Everyone should have prizes, and everyone should apply for them.
Yeah. And there's the Emmy as well.
And the Emmys, no, I beg to differ, which I think the international Emmys should be shut down immediately because they're full of corruption and jobbery and stuff like that. And I think the Emmys actually have a record of giving prizes to extremely unimaginative films, and they're stuck back 20 years ago in the past of PBS. They fail actually to select the most important stuff on American TV, and they're absolutely packed with people from dying media.
Yeah. What about the BAFTAs? I mean, what about that? The process for the BAFTA
I
award.
think it's great that the BAFTA Film Awards now have a documentary award. I think it's right and proper, and there's now actually an interesting campaign to create a documentary award for the Golden Globes, which is another...
It should happen, it's a good thing.
None of these awards should not have documentary categories.
But in Britain, it's good. You've got the Griersons, they're fantastically... I mean, they're clean. They give prizes to good films, and people sit up and notice the films. So, you should have more awards. Seriously.
Can you just please, you have to speak in the microphone, sorry.
So just thinking about Stories We Tell, the Sarah Polley film. I think it was one of those that didn't get a nomination.
Well, it was on the shortlist and didn't get nominated now.
Yeah. I wonder whether it didn't. Well, I didn't like the film anyway, so I can't judge. But I wonder if it did not get nominated simply because it wasn't good. I don't know.
Or maybe because it was a hybrid.
But I do think, however, that's a different discussion. There are big players in all this, like HBO. HBO will never transmit hybrids, and that seeps through to the... And the instruction when you read out about not too many reconstructions, that is taken very seriously by people. If you have a film that is one long reconstruction, it's unlikely to get an Oscar. But so what? You can apply for other prizes. You can have a prize for reconstructions, or a prize for semi-misleading films featuring obscure Canadian theatrical dynasties. You could have an award specially for that, you know.
I think the Academy, the documentary branch should sort of embrace hybrids. I mean, you know, I can't remember the kind of form of words that was used in the rules that you read out at the beginning, but it seemed to me that form of words offered a huge amount of latitude as to what is a documentary. We should embrace. I mean, Waltz with Bashir didn't quite make it because it was not a documentary. Touching the Void. I actually consider.
Well, it was nominated for
Best
Best Foreign Film.
Bashir didn't get through because we would have lost.
No, it was nominated for Best Foreign Film.
But it was they submitted it also for a documentary. They submitted it to both.
They can throw out films with. I mean, I think that's reasonable. I think Oscars are predominantly devoted to fictions. So if you have a documentary category, it should include cautions against films that are fictions, basically. What's the point of awarding the documentary category?
It says exactly, may employ partial reenactment. Yeah. And animation too, and stop motion and other techniques, etc.
May, but may not too.
May not.
But then it's up to people to vote if they want it or not.
It's time to close this panel, unfortunately. So thank you very much, everybody. And we made it even without Marshall Curry.